Tonight's presentation, although edited for YouTube, contains imagery and subject matter some may find disturbing. While our program is educational, we still feel that viewer discretion is advised.
We missed you at school and thought we'd come pay you a visit. Your fever must have been really awful.
Well, it wasn't just the fever. I have cancer.
Cancer? That sounds scary. How do they know that? I don't understand.
Well, they've done lots of tests on me. They found out that I have leukemia. That's why I had all those bruises. My blood has cancer in it.
Are you going to die?
That was a Peanut special that talks about what it's like to live with cancer. They even show off various perspectives, like that of the patient's siblings.
She's become a real nuisance.
You don't really mean that, do you?
I guess not. It's just that we feel a little left out lately since Janice got sick.
As shocking as a title like The Peanuts Tackle Cancer can be, the actual special is a great resource on the subject, one that could communicate an issue as big and as scary as cancer to an actual child. Whenever I bring up this oddity at events like MomoCon, I find that no one remembers this relic of media history. When I was a kid, pretty much every other show I watched had that very special episode that tackled those societal issues that even a superhero couldn't fix overnight. Static Shock is a great example of this, which, by the way, is on Paramount Plus right now. Today, we plan on covering a mix of modern and older cartoons that gave us a dose of reality on heavy subject matter in a way that is somehow digestible for children and adults alike. For those wondering, we plan on dedicating a video to Static Shock at a later date in favor of showing more recent examples of cartoons talking about everything from absentee fathers to, disturbingly enough, how to cope with a miscarriage. But before we get into that...
Look, man, you gotta produce some content, man. It's been like a month. You haven't done anything. You owe people me money.
Well, there's a lot of games coming out, man. I've been playing games. I've been getting sucked into I'm a gaming channel. I make gaming content. Of course, it takes me a while to make videos, but I'm playing just so much, man. So much to go around.
No, I guess that makes sense. You know, you got Baldur's Gate 3, got Armored Core 6, got Payday 3 and Mortal Kombat 1 coming right around the corner.
Mortal Kombat 1? Mortal Kombat 1, the only game that you need is Raid Shadow Legends!
Raid Shadow Legends is a hero collectathon that boasts over 700 champions spread across 15 unique factions with their own lore and quirks. Between the PvP, dungeons, constant events, regular updates to add even more, and a base of over 400 million downloads, there's plenty to do and see in the world of Raid Shadow Legends. You can even play on either mobile or PC devices. Either way, the heroes and the game will look great no matter what you're playing on. I remember when these guys first started working with me, and I always admired how proud they were of their mocap animation, which continues to be eye-catching to this day in their advertisements and gameplay. Right now, Raid is doing a cool event involving a Hydra, where each of its heads acts as a distinct boss fight. For example, the head of Blight debuffs your champions, making it harder for them to hit, but in return is weak to fire. The head of Torment has a gimmick where they skip your turn and block access to your skills, so the solution is finding the right champion to protect yourself and counter the boss. For new players, you can get your hands on the Stag Knight, one of the best epic champions around, as well as a skin for the Stag Knight literally designed by JonTron. Just use the promo code JTSKIN before October 7th. It's as easy as that. Don't worry, if you're not a new player, you can get the Stag Knight and the JonTron inspired skin through an in-game event. Additionally, Raid is giving away the legendary champion Sun Wukong based on the Monkey King from Chinese mythology. Just log in on 7 different days between now and October 23rd to get your hand on him. Using my QR code not only helps my channel, but it gets you set up with some nifty goodies such as 200k silver, 4 energy refills, a epic skill tome, and a 1-day XP booster, along with the epic champion, Drake.
Alright, instead of working on the video, I'm gonna play some Raid Shadow Legends. Alright, and boink, got him. Oh no. Yeah?
Where the hell is my money?
Oh, I don't know.
It's been a month.
I'm working on the
Over a
video.
month. I don't know. Maybe it's been more than 2 months. I don't know. It's been a while. I need the money.
I'm working on the video right now. You see, I'm playing Raid.
That's a video. It's a video game. It's not a video you were on.
But I was playing.
That?
No, I need that. No, my monies.
So do I. I need it too. Yeah,
I mean, I know I owe you, but
yeah, I know.
the video's sponsored. They're gonna pay for the editors.
I don't know.
I mean, I'll make more videos.
That sucks. Yeah, eventually. You know what? Tree. I'm not even closing your door.
My door. You're letting the bugs in.
Go ahead.
Oh. Well, at least I got Raid Shadow Legends.
Non sequitur transitions aside, today I'm your host at Creepy Reading, and I'd like to invite you to sit back, relax, turn down the lights, and prepare to get serious as we dive into the reality of heavy subject matter in cartoons that dealt with serious issues. Roll the clip.
While researching for this list with the folks over on our Patreon Discord server, we revisited a show from the early aughts that nobody really seems to talk about anymore, called As Told by Ginger, which, I might add, carries a really unique vibe all its own that I definitely did not appreciate enough when the show originally aired. We'd heard that it had one of those very special episodes that explored the possibility of its down-to-earth main character, Ginger Foutley, grappling with feelings of depression and possibly even fantasizing about not existing anymore. While the episode doesn't go as far as to place any diagnosis on Ginger, it destigmatizes feelings and emotions that are very relatable to people like me, who are living with depression. And She Was Gone is centered around a piece of creative writing that Ginger produced for a competition. Her poem is about a fictional girl who inhabits a somber, black and white world and desires to disappear. Ginger had intended for the writing to be emotional, but the trouble begins when she hands in the story to her teacher, Mrs. Zorsky, only to be held after class for a discussion. Mrs. Zorsky had been concerned by what she read, and asked to share Ginger's poem with the school psychologist in order to provide Ginger with a healthy outlet to discuss some of the emotions she had put to paper. At first, Ginger has trouble accepting that the girl in her poem has anything to do with her. It's as if people see something in her writing that she can't, and everyone who reads it either reacts with concern or pity. This reflected my own personal experience, since I always saw myself as someone who was incompatible with depression categorically. Which is to say that in my head, I always pictured myself as an optimist, and reasoned that I'm simply not the type of person to become depressed, which led me to disregard the warning signs that others spotted. I began to develop symptoms of depression in my early 20s, which is relatively common, though for others, these behaviors can start to surface in their early teens. Women are also twice as likely to be diagnosed with depression as men, meaning that there are many young women just like Ginger who will, or have, experienced these feelings. Another thing that I found myself relating to in Ginger's poem is how the character finds the act of existing intrinsically burdensome. There is a desire that many people with depression have that is adjacent to thoughts of self-ending but doesn't involve actual death. The desire to simply stop existing and leave the world behind with no strings attached. Disappearing is an attractive option to fantasize about when everything sucks, but you don't want to disrupt the lives of those around you. I believe that this is what Mrs. Zorsky found to be so troubling about Ginger's poem, and if you find yourself constantly exploring trains of thought like these when alone in your head, there's no reason to go through that on your own. Ginger is exasperated by everyone's concern at first, not wanting to be seen as a head case as she calls it, though eventually she finds some comfort and acceptance in her situation after a conversation with her mom Lois. All Ginger had wanted was to feel normal, and the support she receives from Lois allows her to reconcile the emotions she put into her poem without stigmatization. I really appreciate what this episode has to say about counseling, that our emotions aren't something we need to live in fear of, and that seeking help doesn't necessarily mean that there's anything wrong with you. In her retrospective diary entry, the group counseling Ginger attended is regarded as a positive experience, and she reflects once more on the relationship between herself and the character in her poem.
Courage the Cowardly Dog is quality television, and its showrunners are no strangers to pushing the envelope of what Cartoon Network will allow them to show in both visuals and themes. Some genuine works of art have resulted from this design philosophy, approaching subject matters most children's cartoons wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. An episode that comes to mind is The Tower of Dr. Zalost, which explores the story of a mad scientist who tries to make everyone miserable because of his own inability to overcome depression. Even when he gets what he wants, Dr. Zalost can barely even motivate himself to get out of bed, making him unable to tolerate the happiness of others. Another episode that's often overlooked, despite being a favorite of series creator John R. Dilworth, is Last of the Star Makers, which celebrates how death creates new life in its very moving conclusion. The episode we wanted to cover today, however, is one so dark that Dilworth stated he, quote, could not believe Cartoon Network allowed this episode to be aired due to themes of abuse and domestic violence, in addition to portraying an LGBT couple. The episode, The Mask, is one of the most intense episodes of Courage the Cowardly Dog. It focuses on the relationship between two women making the best of a bad situation together, and how their lives are disrupted and controlled by a gangster named Mad Dog. As the episode begins, we don't know much about Bunny and Kitty, other than the fact that they come from what Mad Dog calls a, quote, two-bit joint, in an area of nowhere referred to as, quote, the wrong side of the tracks. With all the blurred lines and implications being made in this episode, there are a few guesses you can make about what exactly a two-bit joint is, but none of them are pleasant. Regardless, Kitty and Bunny have taken to relying on one another, and while the constraints of being released in 2001 mean that they have to refer to each other as best friends, we would later receive confirmation that they are intended to be lovers. Unfortunately, the two would be separated by Bunny's abusive and controlling boyfriend, Mad Dog, who was jealous of their connection. This is where the episode begins, with Kitty roaming nowhere wearing a mask that shelters her from facing the reality that she can never see Bunny again, and seething with hatred for all dogs, since her love had been taken away by one. While Muriel is empathetic towards Kitty and wants to help in any way that she can, Courage just wants to be rid of an individual he only sees as a cruel and monstrous dog hater. To that end, Courage swipes Kitty's memento, a toy mouse given to her by Bunny, which Courage hopes the authorities will recognize and get involved. That toy mouse, however, would instead lead him to the home of Mad Dog, the abusive gangster that caused this whole mess. This wrong side of the tracks is super shady, and Mad Dog's crew are also intimidating, driving the point that he controls others through fear. We see Mad Dog physically drag Bunny into the complex before confronting her in this scene.
Come on, Bunny. Don't I make you happy no more? Or maybe you're still thinking about Kitty. I told you to forget her.
There are multiple abusive and manipulative behaviors on display, chiefly among them being threats of violence, if Mad Dog ever suspects that Bunny and Kitty are seeing one another again, and love bombing after the fact in order to make amends while deepening his control. Situations with abusers like these can make us feel afraid and helpless, which is communicated in the way this scene was composed, giving audiences a glimpse of something very real and very terrible. In the end, Bunny and Kitty are thankfully reunited, with Kitty able to leave her mask behind, and even going as far as to admit that not all dogs are bad.
The animated band Rare Americans is no stranger to dark subject matter, although this punk rock band is a little bit of an outlier considering what else we're covering on this list, them mostly being shows targeted at children. I still feel like that these people connect with all over, they're animated, and they've covered everything from drug addiction and recovery to the subject of today's list item, bullying and related deaths. To give context, in 2019, then 14-year-old Carson would be filmed and mocked while undergoing a drug overdose. Having ADHD, Carson struggled to make friends and found himself being taken in by a group of teens who had no intention of befriending him. These teens invited him to a skate park and wanted to film him completely out of control in ecstasy. The idea being that once Carson lost control, they'd send the weird things he did to his school. They filmed this, laughing and making fun of him, leading up to his eventual unconsciousness where they left him. Carson would be later found by his grandfather, although unfortunately due to the lateness of when he was found, he would die due to the overdose. July 2nd, 2023 would have been his 18th birthday.
All he wanted was just to be people's friends. I know he thought these people were his friends. He called them his friends. When I talked to him, it was always, I'm with my friends. He trusted them.
According to James Priestley, the band's lead singer, this horrific tragedy basically happened right in their backyard. So, in conjunction with the family, Rare Americans created an animated music video titled Carson, which is not only briefly showing what happened to the actual Carson in real life, but imagines a future where kids are more educated and step in to make this stop. In this video, we take a moment to remember Carson by taking in the message that sometimes kids can just be evil. Unlike other lessons, the anti-bullying one is something that necessitates repeating with every new generation. Carson's story is not a singular one, and one that won't be the last. Like the song says, this shit ain't going away. Only through shared empathy and genuine understanding can we actually uplift each other. Some things need to be stood up to, and this song is basically a plea for the audience to report and help when you see it. Carson's death is something that could have been prevented if even one of those kids decided to check up and make sure that he was okay after taking a copious amount of ecstasy. Unfortunately, we don't live in that world.
Captain Planet is an environmental advocacy show about a group of 5 diverse kids who combine their powers of earth, wind, fire, water, and heart to summon the show's namesake. While our hero Captain Planet is focused on taking pollution down to zero, he sometimes gets involved with other serious issues such as drugs and gang violence. Although given the hindsight of the 2020s, it's easy to see the show's missed the mark on more than one occasion.
Wheeler, you and Lincoln have too many kids. It must stop.
The episode of Formula for Hate, despite being presented in over-the-top preachy as hell way, is actually pretty alright and played a big role in educating people in the 90s about the AIDS epidemic. Back then, misinformation about the HIV/AIDS was rampant, with many labeling it the gay disease.
A mystery disease known as the gay plague has become an epidemic unprecedented in the history of American medicine. That today from the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, topping the list of likely victims are male homosexuals who have many partners and drug users who inject themselves with needles. Medical experts say the disease kills 4 out of every 10 people it strikes and that it threatens to explode in the nation's cities.
People are protesting the rights of kids with AIDS to be allowed to attend schools, even posting signs like this in response. So with that in mind, when you watch this episode of Captain Planet, it feels like a direct and biting response to that attitude that remained prevalent throughout the decade. The episode follows student Todd Andrews, who is the star player on the school's basketball team. Unfortunately, he was just given the worst news of his life, with his doctor informing him that he's been diagnosed with HIV, the virus that causes AIDS.
Wait a second, Doc. Are you telling me I've got AIDS?
No, Todd. You tested positive for the HIV virus, and that leads to AIDS, but you don't have AIDS. He could have gotten it from that blood transfusion he had a few years back. They weren't testing blood for the AIDS virus then.
Who cares how I got it? It stinks!
Todd not only feels compelled to break up with his longtime girlfriend given the gravity of the AIDS diagnosis, but his little brother is beaten up for defending his name. And also a mob of angry people attacked his mom's business, all because this rat guy leaked it to rule the world?
Knock it down!
The longtime enemy of the Planeteers, Vern Muscum, is spreading misinformation that directly puts Todd, a child, in the path of a lynch mob waiting to break down his door and burn his house down. That may seem morbid, especially for a show like Captain Planet, but that's because this episode is inspired by the real-life story of Ryan White, a young adult who contracted HIV from a blood transfusion.
In 1984, my 13-year-old son, Ryan White, contracted HIV from tainted hemophilia medication and was told he only had 6 months to live. But Ryan fought on for 6 years. He bravely faced the challenge of living with HIV, showing all of us that the stigma and injustice was wrong.
He faced persecution from his own town when they learned of his diagnosis. He later became an advocate for bringing knowledge of this horrible disease to the public. The episode ends with Captain Planet teaching a school assembly on how AIDS is transmitted, and why casual contact with an HIV-infected person is okay.
A lot of you are worried about AIDS.
You can't get AIDS from casual contact. Hugging, touching, they're okay. You can use the same water fountain or eat in the same cafeteria. It's safe. He's the same kid who played his heart out for you right here on this court last week.
Todd had any other disease, you'd be cheering him on. Right now, Todd needs your support. The power is yours.
Funnily enough, being presented with facts makes all the townspeople change their minds before arresting Scum for inciting a mob to attack a teen. Captain Planet may be insane and retroactively not the best in its advocacy, but considering that AIDS misinformation has been going strong once at the 2000s, a whole decade after the show originally aired, it's hard to be mad at the episode. Around this time, bands like the Foo Fighters actively raise money through sold-out shows that tell people that AIDS isn't real. This happened! The YouTuber Miles Power did an amazing series of videos covering what the AIDS denialism movement currently looks like for those interested in further research.
Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur follows the dynamic duo of Lunella, a 13-year-old super genius living in New York's Lower East Side, and Devil, a dinosaur who stepped through a portal she made on accident. The pair battle against the standard fare of supervillains, aliens, and extra-dimensional entities you would expect from a Marvel superhero cartoon, but also more underhanded and insidious threats against their community. For example, in the first episode, Lunella becomes Moon Girl in order to stop an electric-based villain that's been causing blackouts, which has been ruining business traffic for many in the area, including her own families. Actually, there are quite a few villains that have negative effects on the Lower East Side's community, and during some of these events, the community even helps Moon Girl fight back, such as in the episode Like Mother, Like Moon Girl, which deals with the topic of recognizing the power of one's voice and when to use it. As the episode begins, the mayor recognizes Moon Girl's achievements and contributions to the LES in a ceremony where she and Devil are named community captains. While this is validating at first, Lunella is a bit uneasy about being scrutinized as a public figure, and apprehensive about becoming a voice of her community. Expectations can be considered high because of the hope she represents to a historically and systematically marginalized community, and Lunella isn't necessarily ready for that kind of pressure. Unsure of how to use her voice and doubting herself, Lunella receives a convenient proposal from a rich and powerful inventor couple named the Muzzlers, who want to use her voice for their initiative, Make the Best LES. This initiative would see the Muzzlers moving into the Lower East Side, and utilizing their high tech to make a few updates. They have even upgraded the computers at Lunella's school as a show of goodwill. While their intentions may seem positive at first, the Muzzlers' delightful veneer is little more than an act, and their pitch is filled with red flags. Nevertheless, Lunella chooses to lend her voice to the initiative as Moon Girl, though it quickly becomes clear the changes being made to her community are for the worst. Over-policing from the Muzzlers' robots has edged out the artists, buskers? Is it buskers? Okay. And vendors, which were the blood of the LES, silencing the once vibrant and lively neighborhood. One interesting thing that the show does to illustrate the Muzzlers' lack of boundaries is the way that they pose, having them appear very at home in the city hall, and getting uncomfortably close when Moon Girl confronts the inventors about their changes. This lack of boundaries is partially what leaves them feeling entitled to make all these changes to a community where there are newcomers. This is the first time the show uses the term gentrification to accurately describe what the Muzzlers are doing to the LES. Their so-called beautification campaign reveals itself to being one to impose their sterilized vision of the community. They don't care about the community already living there, as they have a vision for what it should look like, excluding the folks already living there. Disney now actually has a kids show that tackles the social and economic realities of gentrification in a way where young people can see clear examples on how it harms communities. Moon Girl is furious about having been tricked into using her voice for a bad cause, and along with failing to get the mayor on her side, Moon Girl is then confronted by her mother. Is it Audrey? I haven't watched the show in a few months, who proceeds to chew Moon Girl out for having promoted the Muzzlers' initiative, and how she expected more from her. Lunella is able to ask her for advice, where the show has this to say.
Lunella, your voice does matter. It always matters. You just have to use it wisely.
But how?
People make themselves heard with more than just words.
Ultimately, it is Moon Girl and Adria joining forces to uplift their neighborhood and raise their voices in protest against the recent changes to the LES, which caused the mayor to have a turn of heart and reject the Muzzlers' demands. This actually leads to a very unique and experimental battle scene where the Muzzlers use a foreshadowed invention to block out the voices of the community, taking their plan to its logical conclusion and making it so that only the voices that can be heard are their own. Moon Girl acts on Adria's advice, making herself heard in any way that she can in order to break through the robot's defenses. With help from the rest of the LES, they were able to take back the block and save the day. Many children of color, especially speaking for places like the US, will experience trying to understand their place in their culture and their struggle, to figure out what their voice means and how to use it. even wondering if it really matters if they contribute or not. And not many, if any, shows get to tackle that particular angle of discussion for kids. Moon Girl does get to though, and comes to a positive conclusion about everyone's voices deserving to be heard, and that fighting for what your community wants is worth it. For the show not only empowers young people by reinforcing their voices do matter, while also providing examples of how they can make themselves heard, is a tremendously positive message, and one that people ought to hear.
The Ghost and Molly Mcgee is a supernatural comedy cartoon that centers around the unlikely friendship of an optimistic teenage girl and the grumpy ghost that occupies her family's new home in Brighton. The theme song actually does a great job at summarizing the premise of the show if you're unfamiliar with this recent addition to the Disney Channel, which premiered its second season earlier this year in April of 2023. With the second season of episodes, the show begins to tackle some complicated but also very personal issues. As we've discussed earlier in this list, cartoons like this, when done smartly, can pass down not only empathy, but also coping skills to kids that might need it. This makes it an especially pleasant surprise when shows like Molly Mcgee addresses topics that often go undiscussed and underrepresented. The episode we wanted to focus on is actually about Molly's Jewish American friend Libby and her relationship with her absentee father in the episode Like Father, Like Libby. Our first introduction to Libby's dad, Matthias, is through a package she receives in the mail along with a letter congratulating her on her bat mitzvah. The letter has arrived months late, and furthermore, the sender got Libby's favorite animal wrong, giving her a plush frog instead of a turtle.
Here's hoppin'. You have a great bat mitzvah.
What, bat mitzvah? Your bat mitzvah was months ago, and everyone knows your signature animal is the turtle. Whoever sent this doesn't know you at all.
It's from my dad.
All right. That is such a nice, thoughtful gift.
The letter invites Libby to visit Matthias in Knotsworthy while he's in town promoting his book, and we later learn that it's been 6 years since Matthias had even seen his daughter, instead electing to spend all of his time traveling and working on his novel. Now that that's finished, naturally Libby takes this to mean that her dad intends to make up for lost time and asks her mom, Leah, to drive her to Knotsworthy in order to see him. Leah, however, is hesitant, but agrees. She can see through Matthias's performative parenting and foresees disappointment for her daughter. Though she trusts Libby to be strong no matter what happens, the pair then proceed to drive across multiple state lines as Libby bubbles with excitement, all while Leah pleads with her to manage her expectations as gently as possible. This is actually pretty hard to watch if you grew up with an absentee parent and you just know, you know that he isn't going to be as sentimental as you would like. You know that he isn't going to be there and try to make up for lost time like she expects. Libby even goes as far as to sing an entire musical number about how much this reunion means to her and how much she missed Matthias and how she fantasizes about her family being complete again, with the heel being really twisted with this line right here.
Me and my dad, we've been apart for so long. I was scared he didn't care about me, scared he was gone. But now he's coming back, and I'm singing a happy song. I'm not sad, 'cause at last it's me and my dad.
The whole time you're waiting for the letdown, the moment when Libby's worst fears about Matthias not caring enough to stay are realized. And when it finally happens, you can see the exact moment that this poor girl's soul leaves her body.
You know, we have to work on developing a direction for the series, and then I have to travel for research again, and I have to worry about tours and signings, and maybe some...
Libby comes away from this experience with renewed appreciation for her mom, who's always there for her even when her dad isn't. To Leah, the title of Matthias' book, Chasing Miracles, is a frustratingly ironic one, since she has always referred to Libby as her miracle. It's likely that there are many young people who will watch this episode and find themselves in Libby's shoes. disappointed and confused by one of their parents choosing not to be around. Oftentimes as kids, we give parents like these the benefit of the doubt, and sometimes we even place them on a pedestal that is undeserved, like Libby, building up a mental projection that ultimately comes crashing down. Like Father, Like Libby is a warning against this unhealthy behavior, and a suggestion to appreciate the people that choose to be around you instead of the blood that chooses not to, which is good advice to receive at any age.
One of the things that makes these cartoons so important is how they can teach us the skills to cope with hardship and sadness. One of the most ubiquitous of life's tragedies that nearly all of us will face at some point is the passing of a loved one. As the years go by, those important to us leave us behind, meaning that this path of grief and acceptance is one we all will eventually walk. The comedy/slice-of-life animated series Rugrats makes this concept more approachable for young people by giving us insight into how Chucky and his father Chaz Finster cope with the loss of Chucky's late mother Melinda, who died in the hospital when he was only a few months old. The episode Mother's Day takes place before Chaz marries Kira from the Rugrats in Paris movie, a point in the series where Chaz is a single father and neither the audience nor Chucky know anything about his biological mother. The episode is about the baby's search for a Mother's Day present for their own moms, leaving Chucky excluded at first, since he doesn't remember his mother at all. We learn that the reason for this is because Chaz has been keeping Melinda's things in a box out of sight, choosing to avoid a difficult conversation with his son, or even confronting his own feelings about his wife's death. He asks Dee Dee to hold onto the box for him, sharing his reasoning for hiding these memories of Chucky's mom from him, even though it seems like projection. Dee Dee is concerned about her friend, but understanding. Chaz isn't ready to talk about Melinda with Chucky yet, and even though his avoidance behavior isn't the healthiest choice, the right push will motivate him to open up. Meanwhile, the babies are reminiscing about their favorite memories with their mothers. When we learn something else about Chucky's mom, it turns out that Chucky does have one memory of Melinda that manifests as a recurring dream. The dream takes place in Melinda's garden, and the normally anxious and timid Chucky remembers that being with his mom made him feel confident and safe. This is expanded on later in the episode, when the babies are reflecting on what exactly it means to be a mom, and in a very wholesome moment, Chucky realizes that his dad is already the best mom he could have asked for. That's when Chucky does find the box Dee Dee has stowed away, and Chucky instantly recognizes the woman from his dreams on a picture inside, and reasons that it would make the perfect Mother's Day gift. When Chaz sees the photograph of his late wife, he and the soundtrack immediately fall silent, as his expressions twist with pain.
Hi, little guy. Did you and your friends have fun?
He misses her terribly, and he isn't ready for his son to feel the pain of grief either. That's when Dee Dee intervenes to deliver the push we mentioned earlier. Shows like these are impactful, not only in order to relate to the struggles the characters are going through, and for building empathy for the people around us, by learning about the very real things families go through. I like to imagine that a parent going through something similar, or even one of the kids in the audience, saw this episode and felt less alone in the pain of losing a loved one. The episode ends with Chaz sharing the memories inside of the box with Chucky, giving him insight into the kind of woman Melinda was, and how much she loved the both of them. One of the things inside of the box was a journal she kept in the hospital, the final entry of which was a poem she wrote, in order to help her own son to cope with her passing.
My sweet little Chucky, though I must leave you
behind me, this poem will tell you where you always can find me. When a gentle wind blows, that's my hand on your face. And when the tree gives you shade, that's my sheltering embrace. When the sun gives you freckles, that's me tickling my boy. When the rain wets your hair, those are my tears of joy. When the long grass enfolds you, that's me holding you tight. When the whippoorwill sings, that's me whispering night.
Not many people know that the PBS cartoon Arthur had a response episode to the September 11th attacks that aired just 1 year later in 2002. Well, unless you watched this video, I guess. It's probably because this episode is actually called April 9th, and doesn't actually feature 9/11 at all. Instead, it shows how the students of Lakewood Elementary cope with a fire at the school. Many of Arthur's friends and classmates experience some form of loss or trauma as a result of the fire, and it's shown in a way that parallels what many young people are going through in the wake of the September 11th attacks, such as fearing for the safety of a parent or oneself. Healing in the aftermath of a disaster will always be an important lesson for kids to learn. However, when the episode aired, the struggles of its characters were especially relevant to its child audience. Arthur's dad, David, is catering a breakfast at Lakewood when the fire starts, and is still inside the burning building as the students are being evacuated. Arthur wants to make sure his dad is okay, but it isn't safe to go back into the building.
Don't worry, Arthur. My crew is looking for him. They're gonna get him out.
Can I just see him?
Stop! It's not safe to go in there yet.
This feeling of helplessness as he's forced to remain outside is difficult for Arthur to process, and it's an emotion he would revisit in nightmares later. Despite the fact that his dad was rescued by the firefighters, a nagging feeling of paranoia surrounding David's catering job stayed with Arthur even weeks after the event, thus making it difficult for him to sleep due to the stressed dreams.
Hey, that's my dad! Someone help him! Dad!
Stress.
This would eventually lead to Arthur faking being sick to avoid going to school, though his dad quickly catches on to the act.
I don't think I can go to school.
You're not that hot.
Yeah, my throat is killing me. I can barely talk. I need some of your chicken soup. Now.
Well, I can't do it now, but I'll make you a big pot of it as soon as I get home.
But what if you don't come home? What if something bad happens to you at the aquarium?
Arthur, nothing's going to happen to me at the aquarium. Why on earth would you think... Oh, are you worried about me because of the fire?
David, who normally laughs at his son's attempts to get out of school, can see how the fire affected him, and that Arthur is truly worried. Concern for a parent's safety is something that David remembers feeling when he was young, allowing the two to make a connection.
Do you know that when I was your age, Grandma Thora was in a car accident? She wasn't hurt, but for weeks afterwards, I was worried whenever she set foot in a car. Even when she just went to the store for a bottle of milk, I was afraid she'd be in another car accident. While I was waiting for her to return, I'd shoot crumpled up balls of paper into the wastebasket, and I told myself that if I made more baskets than I missed, she would come home safely. Then one day, I forgot to do it. She was gone for 3 hours, and I didn't shoot one basket. And you know what happened?
What?
She came home just fine.
At the end of the day, however, it's the parent's job to worry about the child and not the other way around. Another bittersweet story from the episode is Binky's arc, which explores the trauma that sticks to even the toughest individuals after exposure to a disaster. As the students were evacuating, Binky came face to face with the fire before being led outside by Mr. Ratburn. Not one to admit when he's rattled, Binky holds his feelings in, even lashing out when pressured by the other kids. This unresolved trauma will resurface again when Binky pulls a fire alarm at their temporary placement school, fixating on the amount of time it takes for the fire department to respond.
Did you see those mighty mountain dweebs run? What a bunch of scaredy cats. But I was really impressed with the firefighters. It only took them 3 minutes and 29 seconds to get here. It's nice to know they're so fast.
Sensing that he may be acting out as a result of his exposure to the fire, the principal of Binky's school suggests that he seek counseling, though Binky would refuse in lieu of community service. Continuing to shelter behind his tough persona would only make things worse. Binky would start to hallucinate smoke and flames after returning to the school post repairs. Binky flees the school, but is confronted by former volunteer firefighter, Mr. Flensky.
Shouldn't you be in school?
I can't go back there. I just can't. I keep on seeing flames and smoke and...
It's okay, Binky. Believe me, I know how you feel.
You do?
Sure I do. When I saw my first fire close up, I had trouble sleeping for weeks. But after some time passed, I didn't feel so scared.
Why not?
I did what we're doing right now, talking about it. Don't you feel a tiny bit better now that you've told someone how you really feel?
Yeah.
Despite the fact that Binky doesn't overcome his fear of fire by the end of the episode, at the very least, he is opening himself up and healing. Mr. Frensky assures him that it will get easier with time, which is often the best outcome one can hope for in the wake of trauma. The episode ends with Sue Ellen reflecting how much has changed since the fire, writing that this Friday it will be 1 month since April 9th. In the aftermath of a disaster, whether it's a fire at your school or something like 9/11, it will have a ripple effect that can be felt across the whole country, and we start to think of time as being relative to that disaster. When this episode of Arthur aired, a year had passed since the September 11th attacks. Many people around my age still remember hastily trying to return to a normal life and feel safe again in spite of what happened. In this way, the parallels between what Arthur's characters experienced and the things real people endured are eerie looking back. It's an important, noble thing to pass down coping skills and the ability to understand trauma through shows like these.
This show about a family of animated cartoon talking dogs has made me cry so many times in the last 5 months, it's just not even funny. Bluey is a show that has a reputation of taking very mature lessons, stuff that even adults can learn, and figuring out a way to make it appropriate and digestible for children and adults alike. This has even gained an older audience of depressed teens and parents due to the way that Bluey offers genuinely good advice on how to raise your kid and the pure family vibes the show gives off.
If I'm talking to a grown-up and you want me, you just come up and put your hand on my arm. So now I know that you want to talk to me. Then I'll do this to show you that I know you're there and that you want to talk to me. What do you think?
In fact, we could have made this entry about many of the 7-minute episodes which range from showing respectful depictions of neurodivergent people as seen in the episode Army.
There's something going on with me. I'm not good at doing what I'm told. I can't sit still, and I can't remember anything, like numbers or letters on my hat.
Well, you're really good at playing Army.
To experimental methods of storytelling, like the dialogueless episode Rain and the surreal, trippy, dreamlike episode Sleepy Time. There's really a lot to love about this show. It won't talk down to you, and often the parent characters are just as self-aware as you, the audience, is, almost inviting you to play along. An example of Bluey refusing to talk down to its audience can be found in the episode Copycat. The playful tone is interrupted fairly quickly as it takes on a somber shift when Bluey discovers a bird that's been injured on the side of the road. Bluey instantly drops the game and attempts to help Bandit get the little budgie to the hospital. Despite their best efforts, however, it's not great news.
It's bad news, I'm afraid. The little budgie died.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry, kiddo. Come here.
Bluey takes this turn of events pretty hard, and this death clearly causes distress, so in an attempt to come to terms with everything that's going on, Bluey reenacts a situation through play at home. The episode ends with Bluey's game not exactly going the way that she wanted it to, but in doing so, she finds a mature understanding of what death is and how to cope with it as a part of life.
That's okay. There's nothing we can do. It's out of our hands.
Something like this would have actually been very helpful back then. Some things really just are out of your hands, and the best solution is to survive and move on. That's not even the most mature and controversial thing Bluey has commented on. In the episode Onesies, we're introduced to Bluey's Aunt Brandy. It's stated explicitly in the show that she had not been around for 4 years. We later learned that the reason for this is because that it was hard for Brandy to be around her sister Chili's kids due to her own inability to have kids.
Why can't she just have the things she wants?
Because it's not meant to be.
Over the course of this specific episode, Brandy opens up to her sister Chili about her issues related to being infertile and how that has led to a rift between the two. That said, Bluey has covered not only infertility, but has an episode dedicated to passing along a message about how to deal with a miscarriage based on someone's real-life experience. In the episode titled The Show, we begin with Bingo, Bluey's sister, having a kid moment, and Chili, the mom, passing down her method of tackling being sad and not wanting to keep going.
Bluey, checklist.
Oh, okay.
I have a little cry.
Check.
Then I pick myself up.
Check.
Dust myself off.
Check.
And keep going. The show must go on.
Ooh,
Woo!
Over the course of the episode, the kids put on a show for their parents, reenacting how they got together in a goofy way. When they get to the point where Chili becomes pregnant with Bluey, this is what happens.
So then they... Bingo!
Their body language says it all. And the ironic thing is that back when I first saw this episode, I jokingly speculated that they might be trying to imply a miscarriage situation. But I thought that might be too morbid for a show in this age bracket. However, this conspiracy theory of mine was later confirmed by Joe Brum, one of the show's runners, in the book Hard to Bear by Isabel Oderberg. Here's the exact quote he had to say about the subject.
The show indeed does point at Chili having a miscarriage. In fact, this is what the episode is about, essentially. Chili is passing down her method of coping to Bingo. I can't say too much about who it's based on, as the person involved would not want me to. The fact that her other children still need taken care of, there was really no choice for her but to pick herself up and keep going, which I always admired.
Bluey to me is a show that may be appropriate to kids, but ultimately is incredibly entertaining and fun to watch as an adult as well. It's just a really nice, feel-good slice of life show. It's able to make its themes and messages understandable to young children while presenting its story in a way that's feasible and acceptable to the real-world situations we live through. It's easy to forget this in moments of tragedy, but just so you guys are aware, kids go through some of the same dark, messed up stuff that adults do. And unlike us, they need more help than anyone trying to figure out and understand the world in front of them. It's good that shows like Bluey can deliver these important, crucial messages while still generally being appropriate. I won't go too far into my own story, but these last couple of months here have been pretty crazy, and this feel-good show has gotten me through so much during my hiatus, and I consider myself lucky to be able to share some of the fruits of that with you. So to all the Patreon members that have been watching Bluey with me in the Discord in preparation for this video, I'd like to thank you and everyone who's watching this video right now. I consider myself to be in a very lucky position to even have viewers at all, so thanks for hearing me out.